the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum.
The Secretary General must resign.
It's day 19 of the Israel-Hamas war. The action has two theaters now. The first is in New York at the United Nations Security Council. The second is in Gaza, where the bombs continue to rain. Let's start with the political battleground. On Tuesday, the UNSC, the United Nations Security Council, held an open debate on this war. The first speaker was Antonio Guterres, the United Nations chief. And he said the Hamas attack on Israel did not happen in a vacuum. In other words, Israel is also to blame.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. They have seen their land steadily devoured by settlements and plagued by violence, their economy stifled, their people displaced, and their homes demolished.
Israel is not taking that well. Guterres basically blamed them, the Israelis, for the Hamas attack, and that too at the United Nations Security Council. So Israel now says Guterres must resign.
The UN is failing, and you, Mr. Secretary General, have lost all morality and impartiality. Because when you say those terrible words that these heinous attacks did not happen in a vacuum, you are tolerating terrorism. And I think that the Secretary General must resign. Because from now on, every day that he is here in this building, unless he apologizes immediately, today we called him to apologize, there's no justification to the existence of this building.
We understand what Guterres was trying to say, but his choice of words, poor at best. He's now tried to clarify his remarks. Guterres says that he was not defending the Hamas attack. He was only speaking of Palestinian grievances. Let's see if Israel buys his clarification. Now, after Guterres, the UNSC members took turns. The US was represented by Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He said all acts of terror are unjustifiable, whether in Nairobi, Mumbai, or New York. He was referring to the 26/11 attack on Mumbai in 2008. He also had a warning for Iran. Blinken promised swift and decisive action if US assets were targeted. But he did not call for a ceasefire. That demand came from the Muslim world. All of them rallied behind Palestine. Listen to this.
Iran aligned with international community in endorsing the call for an immediate ceasefire and a cessation of Israeli relentless military aggression.
It seems that Israel is above the law. It is violating international law without any deterrent. It is running roughshod over Security Council resolutions.
The international community must take a firm stance to end military operations, double standards and selectivity abiding by UN laws and resolutions. This policy has dangerous repercussions that go beyond this crisis.
Some prefer to look the other way in face of such atrocities. They prefer not to speak about crimes against humanity and war crimes. They prefer to pretend as if Palestinian people are just numbers and they have no souls and rights.
How about that? Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia on the same page. You don't see that every day. But how likely is a ceasefire, or at least a temporary truce? Well, there seem to be two proposals on the table. The US wants a pause in the fighting, not a ceasefire. They're calling it a pause, so that aid and resources can enter Gaza. Russia wants a ceasefire. They want Israel to stop the war. And both these countries have a veto power, meaning they can defeat the other's proposal. So where does that leave Gaza? Helpless. A UN Security Council resolution is binding. It puts pressure on Israel to stop the war. Without it, Israel can prepare for the ground invasion. And the US has made this clear, its position clear. It is not time for a ceasefire, says the US.
As I said from the beginning, we want to see all measure of protection for civilians, and pauses in operation is a tool and a tactic that can do that for temporary periods of time.
So does that mean
that is not the same as saying a ceasefire. Again, right now, we believe a ceasefire benefits Hamas, a general ceasefire.
Meanwhile, the situation in Gaza continues to get worse. Around 700 Gazans were killed in the last 24 hours, 700. The overall death toll is around 6,500, and half of them are children. I'll repeat that. Half of the fatalities in Gaza are children. If there is a ground invasion, that could increase. Most of Gaza is now just debris, piles of concrete, twisted metal, and dust. Imagine living in this situation. It's a daily wait for the next Israeli airstrike, and when it hits, your worst nightmare begins. That's what happened in Gaza City. A father was trapped under the rubble after rockets destroyed his home. When rescuers got to him, he had just one question: is my family safe?
وانت 100% طلعوا هالقد كلهم عايشين في الشلال. اطلع يلا كلهم عايشين. مرتك طلعناها وامونا طلعناها وهلا طلعناها وامونا طلعناها وشرف امي في الشلال تضايق.
The hospitals are another horror story. The WHO says there are 35 hospitals in Gaza, 35. Out of them, 12 are shut down. Same with healthcare centers. 46 out of 72 healthcare centers are not functioning in Gaza. Medicines, food, and power are low. Officials say hospitals are on the brink of total collapse. Fuel seems to be the biggest worry. Israel has blocked fuel deliveries into Gaza. As a result, power is running out. The United Nations says that operations in Gaza could end by tonight. And how will this affect patients? Well, no power means no ventilators, no life support. This could put 2,000 cancer patients at risk, also 130 premature babies. These babies cannot breathe on their own. They are in incubators. One video sums up how bad things are. It was shot at the Indonesian hospital in Gaza. It shows an ambulance arriving in complete darkness. No street lamps, no lights at the hospital. Everything is pitch black. Doctors had to light the way with their mobile phones. It tells you how bad the situation is. And this is before the ground invasion. We've been hearing about it since day one, the ground invasion, that Israel will invade the Gaza Strip. Well, the army says it's ready.
The IDF is ready for ground operations and will take a decision together with the political establishment regarding the manner and the timing of the next stage. We are conducting a war.
The army is ready. So what is the holdup? There are multiple factors at play here. Number one, hostages. The Hamas still holds more than 200 people. Some of them are dual nationals. If Israel invades, their future is uncertain. So there is pressure from Western countries, including the US. They want Israel to delay the operation, to buy time and get the hostages out. Number two, the endgame. Israel says it wants to eradicate the Hamas. Great. But what comes after that? Who do they leave in charge of Gaza? Reports say Benjamin Netanyahu has not decided on that. And that's a key issue. Defeating and eradicating are two very different things. Just ask the Americans. They defeated the Taliban in 2001. They occupied Afghanistan for 20 years. But in the end, the Taliban came back. Israel should be mindful of that. Number three, the cost of invasion. And I do not mean the financial cost. I mean the human cost. Israel is committing thousands of soldiers into a deadly battlefield. They don't know what Hamas has planned. Chances are it will be a tough urban war. And that means casualties. So you can't just rush in the door, because if you do, it could be a trap. And finally, reason number four, the fear of a wider war. The Hezbollah has already threatened to join this war. Invading Gaza would give them an excuse. Today, the Hezbollah chief held an important meeting in Lebanon. Leaders of Hamas and the Islamic Jihad also attended. And what did they discuss? A route to victory against Israel. So Israel could end up fighting a two-front war. And US support or not, that's a scary prospect. So Netanyahu is taking his time. His popularity is already low. Another bad decision could seal his fate.